بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
And we are reading a set of verses that speak about sadaqah and infaq fi sabilillah, giving in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this applies to both zakah and sadaqah. Well, when we say sadaqah by itself, it can include zakah. Or giving in the way of Allah can include zakah. But if we want to be more specific, zakah is obligated sadaqah, obligated charity, and sadaqah is voluntary. When we get a bit more technical with the terminology, sadaqah is recommended. And the scholars, they talk about in fiqh, is there an obligatory charity besides zakah? So that is a fiqhi mas'ala. In Sharia, are there obligatory giving or charity that one must pay outside of zakah? And so the majority of our scholars say no. They say the only obligatory charity that a person must pay is zakah. Outside of zakah, it's generally recommended. In very exceptional cases, if there's like an emergency and the need of the community cannot be fulfilled except through charity, then there might be some type of communal obligation or something of that sort. But generally, the majority of our scholars say no. Some scholars make the argument that yes, there is an obligatory charity outside of zakah, and they base that on the verses in Surah Al-Ma'arij, for example, وَالَّذِينَ فِي أَمْوَالِهِمْ حَقٌّ مَعْلُومٌ لِلسَّائِلِ وَالْمَحْرُومِ. There is an appointed or recognized right that the sa'il, the beggar, and the one deprived have with regards to the sadaqah. And so they said that this ayat indicate that there's a haqq, they have a right outside of zakah. If there are poor members within the society and their needs are not being met, then there is an obligation on the wealthy outside of zakah to help make sure the needs of the poor and the beggars their needs are met. And so this is a scholarly debate. Is zakah sufficient to fulfill that obligation or not? The majority of our scholars say zakah is sufficient. Outside of that, it is recommended. So that's just a fiqhi mas'ala. But these set of verses are talking about zakah not from a fiqhi perspective. They're talking about zakah more about the spiritual etiquettes, the etiquettes and the spiritual realities of zakah, and sadaqah as well. So and then in the last lesson we took, and the lesson before that as well, the prohibition of men, adha, and riya. Three terminologies. Men is to mention one's favor. Adha, and so to recall, to be like, I did this, I gave this charity, I fed that person, I put clothes on their back, I gave them a roof under their head, for them to be under. So this is men. You're mentioning your favors on a person. It's called men. And this nullifies the reward of giving the sadaqah that was given. And we said this can also apply to non-financial, acts of kindness, assistance. You serve somebody like, oh yeah, remember that day I did this for you? That's a men. That's the mentioning of one's favor, which nullifies the reward of that deed. Adha is injury, and this is verbal injury. The little word of adha means to hurt someone or to bother them. Like when somebody is annoyingly bothering, you call them mu'dhi. You're a mu'dhi. You're somebody that is bothering. You're difficult. You're hurtful. So adha is when a person says something that hurts another person. So they translate it as injury. And so this is a verbal statement where a person is made to feel degraded, looked down upon. And we said it comes usually from a place of arrogance, obsession with oneself, and egocentric, kind of mindset, forgetfulness of Allah's favor, and a lack of gratitude. And then the last thing is riya. And riya is to show off. And we mentioned that we as human beings, we have a natural desire to be recognized as being intelligent, brave, and generous. These are positive qualities we want to have amongst society in our communities, and we want people to recognize that in us. We're very egocentric. Our nafs, all it cares about is the satisfying of its desires, right? That's our lower self. It wants the satisfaction of its pleasures and desires, and part of that is reputation and title and name and prestige. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he said, the greatest thing I fear upon you is ashirk al-asghar, is the minor shirk, ar-riya. It is to do your deeds with an ulterior motive. And we mentioned riya is very subtle. It's one of those things that you might not notice at all, or you might not notice for a very long time. And so we shared the prophetic dua that Brother Karan brought up. Oh Allah, I seek your protection of associating partners to you intentionally, and I seek your forgiveness for what I do unknowingly or unintentionally. So there's a prophetic dua. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika an ushrika bika shay'an a'lamu wa astaghfiruka lima a'lamu. So that's kind of a recap of what we covered in the previous lesson and the one before. Brother Adnan, you had a question about that kind of the mandatory giving and voluntary giving. Am I? Does it matter if the recipient is non-Muslim or Muslim? With zakah, it does. Only with zakah. And so zakah, only the recipients must be Muslim to receive zakah. With sadaqah, it is not restricted. There's no restriction to sadaqah. It can be to Muslim. It can be to animals. If a person sponsors a pet, shelter or something of that sort, that's a form of sadaqah if they make the intention. It can be the environment. There's part of we're Khalifa fil ard, we're deputies on this earth. We're Allah's deputies on this earth, right? That's what Khalifa means. Who are we deputies of? We're deputies of Allah Ta'ala. Allah has put us on this earth to care for this world. So it can be towards the natural environment, planting trees, keeping the environment clean, any project to sustain the natural world, and that's also a form of sadaqah. So no, sadaqah is not restricted to Muslims or even human beings or even living beings. It can be any good that is brought to the world can be a form of sadaqah, as long as the intention is made sincerely for Allah's sake. Yes. And of course we have very famous ahadith, right? We have the woman of Bani Israel, a prostitute from Bani Israel, who was once walking by a dog, who was extremely thirsty, trying to get water from a well. And she stopped and grabbed her boot and grabbed water for that dog and gave that dog water, and Allah forgave her because of that deed. And so her sadaqah towards a dog and the sadaqah of a prostitute, of sadaqah of an action, that's it, that's all she could do, earned her forgiveness for all her sins. And to show that anyone can do sadaqah, no matter what their state might be and their sin might be. The only requirement is for Allah to accept the person's deed is La ilaha illallah. Once they have La ilaha illallah, any form of good deed they do, if they do it in that moment, their intention is Allah Ta'ala, then it's a sadaqah for them, inshallah Ta'ala. Yeah. So we have that hadith. Sahaba were actually surprised. They're like, when they heard that story from the Prophet ﷺ, they're like, do we get ajr for that? He's like, you get ajr, you get rewarded for everything with a kidney or a kibid, anything that has a kidney, like any living thing, you get ajr for it, any living thing. So he showed them like sadaqah is vast, right? Acts of charity and kindness, like you can earn that reward in various ways. And at other times he said, tabassumuka fi wajhi akhika sadaqah. Your smile in the face of your brother is sadaqah, right? So sadaqah is a very broad term, although it's commonly used for financial charity. But no, it applies to acts of service, and it applies to Muslims and non-Muslims and animals and even the natural environment. Inshallah.